Welcome to your Rocketwoman Show. Are you looking to 10x your business while attracting your soulmate, finding eternal happiness, and receiving the one solution to all of your problems? I promise you, you will find none of the above in this podcast. Your Rocketwoman has something far more precious for you. We'll get real and talk about the nitty-grittiness of life. From A as in anxiety, to L as in lol, to Z as in zest for life, we'll cover the whole spectrum. All of my guests are my heroes that have inspired me along the way. And here's the totally amazing rocket deal. I chat with my heroes and then they tell me which of their heroes I should invite on the show next. So every other episode we get to expand our universe beyond into the unknown, ever expanding and growing. I hope you enjoy this show, and it's an honor to inspire your rocket launch. Welcome to episode 6 of the Rocketwoman Show. Today we have a blind date in the universe again, as you can see. Last week in episode 5, Vanessa said to me, you have to go speak with Sheila, one of her connections. So I just did that, and I'm so inspired to share this conversation with you. Sheila is a program and partnerships manager with over 18 years experience in the cultural and social impact sectors. She's passionate about building a more equitable, inclusive, and conscious world with a focus on global majority communities. So when I received that introduction, I really needed to refrain and hold back from going and finding out all about her because I was already really curious about her. This is an impromptu conversation. We've never spoken before, so I hope you get to enjoy this rabbit hole that we went down. And join me again next week in my living room when I speak with one of my connections again. Enjoy. Welcome everybody to episode 6 of the Rocketwoman Show. And today we meet in my universe, which means that I have a blind date with somebody I've never spoken to before. Last week in episode 5, Vanessa said, speak to Sheila, because Sheila is an amazing person and I trust my guests. So today I've got Sheila with me. Yay! Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm really happy. So now we're even because now I've had 3 women with you and the first 3 episodes were men. So now we're even. Great.
Getting that gender balance. I'm happy to contribute
Exactly.
to that.
Sheila, I don't know much about you. Vanessa has shared a little bit with me privately, and I really needed to refrain from finding out more because I already thought that from what I saw, that you were so intriguing with your whole story and what you do. So why don't you just explain a little bit more and introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Thank you, Sandra. And yeah, thank you for having me again. And thank you to Vanessa for suggesting me. Bless her. So I'm currently working for an intergovernmental organization called the Commonwealth Foundation. I'm a senior program manager there, and I lead on the advocacy and creative program. So really focusing on sort of creativity for change. We have 3 themes that we're working towards: health justice, climate justice, and freedom of expression, which have come up as core issues for countries across the Commonwealth. But I think, the kind of global issues. Before that, I had taken a sort of 7-month break and I became a certified embodiment coach. That's how I met Vanessa. We spent a whole week actually together in one of our teachers' homes, sort of like living with him and learning. And before that, I'd worked for various organizations, mainly in the charity, not-for-profit sector. And then I moved to the private sector, but sort of stayed in the, non-revenue generating aspect of things. So yeah, mainly social impact and culture for change have been professionally, like my areas of focus. But yeah, I've for the last 2 years, have been doing a lot of, well, 3 years now, I'd say, a lot of inner work, or however we want to call it. And that's something that's really calling me. And it's been phenomenal for me in terms of changing the relationship that I have with myself, but it's also benefited me in other aspects of my life. And I think if everyone got the opportunity to do this, we would live in a much kinder world. So I'm always sort of connecting my individual work with a kind of like the collective. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of like a kind of
And you're
summary.
based in London, right?
Yes, I'm London based. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I already have like 5 million threads we could, or rabbit holes we could dive into. But I'd like to start with finding out a little bit more of, going into social change or cultural, the cultural sector and nonprofit. How did that happen for you? Was that something that came organically, or was that very much chosen from your end?
Um, I would say they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like it came organically and I chose it, if that makes sense. So I think for me, so when I was growing up, I wanted to be a flamenco dancer. I grew up in Spain, in Madrid, up until the age of 12, and I did ballet and flamenco dancing for, from the age of 6 until I was 12. And I just loved flamenco. Like that was my thing. So then I came to the UK and I couldn't continue doing flamenco dancing as such because there wasn't the equivalent in terms of teaching, and I sort of left dance. But I always had it in me. And I think, I was always very rich culturally. Like my dad, I grew up with my dad, and he loved to take us to things. So I was exposed to museums, to, theater, to ballet, to lots of music, concerts, everything. And I just I've always really enjoyed the arts and culture. And I find that they have, like, different art forms in different ways have the ability to really humanize history, to help us connect with each other. And being someone of dual heritage, having suffered like really direct racism and also other forms of discrimination, I've always felt that actually, if you can connect to someone's story through culture, you'll be a lot more empathetic and able to sort of like, like accept them in a way. Like, we talk about creativity for change. So there's nothing wrong with art for art's sake. I think that's also really valid, and it has its place and it's necessary. And in a way, I sort of question that, because even when you're doing art for art's sake, you're putting out a statement or a message, or you're provoking and asking questions in some ways. But anyway, so my point being that I'd always been interested, and when it came to sort of choosing my path, as I came out of university, I was like, yeah, I'd love to get into this and do it really on a grassroots level. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, I find it really interesting to see that for somebody that grew up with a lot of rich culture in their life, and I think like the values are very much imprinted with how we're being raised in our family of origin, what our caretakers bring into our orbit, and I find it really curious to see how that then informs, or at least gives us a launch pad into our own approach of finding our artistic way of creatorship, right? Because for me, growing up with very traditional German parents, there was a bit of a story with my dad being from the eastern part of Germany, and they fled, so they were refugees back, even before the times of the wall, of the Eastern and Western Wall. So they were very much also really busy with the aftermath of the war, being
Mm.
directly impacted, both families. So in a way, there was no capacity or
Mm.
space in their
Yeah.
awareness um, to really dive deeper into creativity. And it also wasn't, in a way, it wasn't in the DNA of the family. It's not really running in the ancestry a lot.
Mm.
So I needed to find my own way in that. And I think in an earlier episode, I also mentioned I always considered myself to be not creative at all because in the
Mm.
typical sense, it's not measurable as in, I'm a good painter or, I was trained in acting or singing or whatever. So finding my approach to creativity and culture as well, even the whole cultural approach. I mean, history, of course, German history, I think you can't get
Mm.
away from that when you're being
Mm.
raised in Germany. But I always find it so enriching to meet with people that have had that available to them in their upbringing, because you can just tell it sort of vibrates on that level. It just
Mm.
shines through. It's just in your DNA, right? What was the background of your family?
So it's really interesting what you're saying because I feel that what you're describing is like sort of being in survival mode,
Mm.
and it's really interesting because I also had that. Like
Hmm.
I grew up in an environment where I'd be like, oh, it's the end of the month, the fridge is almost empty. Like, there's not enough food. So I've always said I was financially like quite poor, but I was very culturally rich. Like I had access to so much cultural capital. And the context for that is that I grew up in 80s Spain, like, right after the Franco dictatorship. It was like movida madrileña, like the Madrilean movement. My dad was an integral part of that. He ran this nightclub called El Calentito. Like they even did a film about it. And
Okay, wow.
like he would hang out with like the likes of, like Almodovar. Well, I don't know if he actually met Almodovar, but I remember seeing a film being like a scene of an Almodovar film being shot right next to where we lived because we lived in the sort of center of Madrid, the El Casco Antiguo, like the old neighborhood. So it was really interesting because even though like I was, like I say, quite poor, like we also had access to all these things. And my dad worked in El Conservatorio. It's like the kind of official school for like music and dance. He was just a concierge there, but like we had access
Still.
to
Hmm.
go to those places, and he really valued that, and he loved it. He loved the fun of it. He, like so he had friends and connections, and that's what opened those doors for us.
Hmm.
But yeah, my background, yeah, I just grew up in Madrid. My parents separated when I was very young. I didn't grow up with my mum. So that was kind of hard and yeah, like strange in a way, like because it's sort of very socially accepted to
Hmm.
grow up with a single mum, but it's not so easily understood to grow up with a single dad. So I'd get asked that question a lot. But I would say, like it was really I was very I feel very fortunate to have had the childhood that I had in terms of being able to go to school on my own and I had a great relationship with my siblings, which we still have. We're very close, my older sister and my younger brother. And yeah, like lots of trauma in there as well.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think really just a kind of easy, like kind of not easy life, but like, um,
Simple.
simple life and enriched in some ways with
Mm.
challenges. My dad was very young when he was left or decided to stay with the three of us. So yeah, he was still learning as he was
Mm.
parenting, and so are we actually. So no judgment there. Um, I mean, as in, am I? I'm not going to generalize for
Hmm.
everyone, but yeah.
Yeah. I can also imagine that at that time, like you say, it wasn't really socially accepted much for a
Mm,
father to stay with the children or for the children to stay with the father. Um, and then, like you say, making it up on the fly. But
mm,
that's really also how you then learn what's required of you, right?
yeah.
Um, how would you say has that opened up conversations in the family that were of a more vulnerable nature, or was your father sort of just trying to make it work?
I would say there was no space for conversation when we
Yeah.
were young. Like my dad grew up in quite an abusive household, and
Mhm.
on the one hand, he was very, very loving, and on the other hand, he was like a complete authoritarian, and we were
Mhm.
shit scared of him. So,
Mhm.
sorry, I don't know if I can actually swear.
Absolutely,
Oh,
absolutely. As I always say up front, this
yeah.
is a swearing zone if you feel like it.
Yeah, we were terrified, let me use but yeah, and then when I did try and bring this up, oh gosh, I think it was 2010. Um, I tried to speak to him during one summer holiday and he sort of victimized himself and then started
Mhm.
crying and then sort of turned against me. And it's a work in progress. I'm currently at the point where I want to be grateful for what he's given us
Mhm.
as opposed to judge him for the hurt he's caused.
Mhm.
And again, they're not mutually exclusive. I can be grateful for the good
Yeah.
things and I can still be hurt
Mhm.
for the things that didn't work. And I was a very submissive child. So out of the three, I was the one who would always try and justify what was going on and try and make it work. And I was the, good child, daddy's girl, trying to just keep
Mhm.
everything, you know, fine. And my sister and my brother were like, Shayla, you're
Mhm.
like the beaten up wife who
Mhm.
defends the abusive husband.
Mhm.
So yeah, it took a while for me to come out of that kind of pattern and that approach. And I think it's all, like we all approach it differently based on how we come into this world, right?
Mhm.
And then when I became a mom myself, I was like, this is unacceptable. And I got so angry. And I
Yeah.
was so angry, but then I was like, oh, but I need my dad's help because I'm a single mom and he's
Yeah.
actually um around and willing to help. And so
Yeah.
navigating that, like having him, appreciating him as a granddad, even
Mhm.
though, as a dad, he was flawed, like we all are, and very proud and difficult to kind of acknowledge his own, yeah, like flaws and mistakes. It's
Mhm.
like either being the hero or the victim.
Yeah.
Like I
But
did
that's the
this stuff.
default modes, right?
Mm,
That's what we're sort of in our toolbox of coping mechanisms. That's very much broadly distributed, right? The
mm,
either denial or the victim mode or the perpetrator,
mm,
whatever you want to call it. But I also think that when when there's so much survival going on due to
mm,
a history that has, you know, not made it easy to investigate within or to strengthen
mm,
the relationship aspect to self, then I think wanting closure or healing for the future generations can be really difficult because
mm,
it won't be coming from the confrontation, at least not from the healthy confrontation or the invitation to talk about it, like you say. But I often find in my work as a coach that um, healing is also, like you say, seeing how he's able to do it differently now as a grandfather, right? Like,
mm,
so I think, at least for me in the beginning of my journey, it was so important to just have closure, have healing, have balance, and totally overdoing that part and asking too much and also expecting too much and,
mm,
just being in that expectation mode of, oh, but I've deserved this, which in the
mm,
end, made me realize that's another facet of the or aspect of the victim too, right? So I think just there's many questions I have in my head, because I find this really beautiful how we dove right into the topic of this. Did that really motivate you to go into your self-discovery, would you say, or was that something that you were already going to do?
So it's really funny because I think that it's only more recently since we've had access. I feel like we now have, I know in previous episodes you've talked about the sort of information overload, but on the other hand, the positive of that is that we have access to so much information that we can choose from. So I don't think that even the concept of actually, I remember reading, so from a very young age, like when we used to buy the print newspaper on the weekends, El País, we used to buy, they had this supplement, and within the supplement, there was always like a psychology article. And it was like, I don't know about it, anything and everything to do with like basically self-help, self-development, but it just wasn't labeled that way. I can't even remember what it was labeled. And I remember like being really drawn to that and reading that. And I have also been someone who's always been very open with my feelings and my emotions. Like even now, like, you know, just talking to you for the first time, I have no problem opening up. And I really don't think that's something I've worked on. I think that's just how I was wired.
Naturally,
that's how I came into this world. So I think that in itself, it's like I have friends who are therapists and they've been like, Sheila, because you speak so openly about everything that's going on for you, like you're kind of in therapy constantly without like knowing. And also, I've been told that when I speak about my issues, it doesn't feel heavy. It feels like bearable and light. So it's not like I'm just really just exposing myself without maybe draining energy, because I'm not doing it to kind of like, of course I'm doing it to get support, but I don't know how to explain it. Anyway, all of this to say is that I feel like all my life I've been sort of trying to improve myself, or to, you know, discover who I am and not just who I am, but like in relation to others and the world. Like that is my thing. It's like I'm working on myself to feel good within myself, but also to be able to connect better with others and to the world, and to contribute more to things and to positive change how I see it. So being of service has also been an orientation. Like it's so cliched, but since I was little, I was like, I just want to do something to, you know, help make the world a better place. Like that was always my thing, you know. But yeah, but I think recently I've been able to, so basically during COVID, you know, with all of the time that we had on our hands, for the first time, like really being able to sit still, like I really started to, I got into it through relationship coaching, love and relationship coaching. That is how I was in a relationship. And I thought, actually, Sheila, you talk about wanting to be in healthier relationships, but how are you in relation to yourself? Can you have a healthier relationship to yourself? Because anyway, I was dating someone, and then after like a month or two, he was like, oh, I think we should be friends. And that literally, I was in love with this person already within 2 months. And then that threw me like again to a place where I couldn't eat and I didn't sleep very well for like a whole week. I lost weight, and I was like, that was January 2020. Sheila, something needs to change here. Like, what's happened? You know, it's not about the other person. This is all you. And that's how it started. And it was great because then I was in the relationship. We got back together. I continued being in the relationship, and it was very challenging because he's a doctor and it was COVID and we couldn't see each other. And then in that time, it was like, okay, working on myself, working on expressing what I need and what I want in a way that's, you know, I'm honoring myself, but I'm also like, like just advocating for myself and also hearing what the other person has to say. But I think I was maybe not aware of the fact that actually he just didn't have it in him to give it to me, and I kept, but it was still very
Yeah.
good for me to be able to do that. And then when the breakup came, and that happened in end of 2021, I was like, I want this breakup to be a breakthrough. Like,
Yeah.
it has to be. And so, how to fall in love with myself. That was like
Yeah.
my assignment, how to fall in love with my life and how to just love and accept myself. And that's how I then really, and then I basically, so that was in 2023. I got coaching, and then in 2023 I was laid, well, I wasn't laid off. A contract of mine with Meta, I was working there, finished, and I'd been earning good money. And I was like, you know what? I have time to devote to myself, because I started the embodiment coaching course actually in 2022, February 2022, like literally
Mm-hmm.
2 months after the breakup. But then I was working full time, parenting full time. I didn't have
Yeah.
the
Wow.
bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2023, February, my contract finished on the Friday and the course started on the Tuesday. I was like, I'm doing this. And at first, I didn't know that I'd do the whole thing, because there was like two parts to it, like the foundations of embodiment, which was all about self kind of discovery, learning.
Mm-hmm.
And then the coaching part came after, and you could just choose. And then I thought, I'll sign up to the whole thing and
Mm-hmm.
let's see how I go, because I was still like, thinking I might get a job, and I did it. And yeah, it's been transformational. And yeah, it's also like just it just I yeah I have no words at the moment. I feel
Yeah.
so much more able to just mother myself and to just be with all of what I feel, and it just feels so good to
Yeah.
to just go through everything and be able to hold myself at the same time.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. And I also think that, sometimes when life throws us a curveball, not sometimes, usually all of the time, um, it's this invitation to go deeper, right? And I think that it
Mm,
always is that. It's just depending on, do we sort of do we hear it, right?
mm,
Can we take or accept that as an invitation rather than playing out the coping mechanism? And what I wanted to ask immediately when you were saying this, um, so you met this person and you pretty quickly fell in love with him, and then COVID came, and you can't help but notice the perfect setup, right? That immediately it's like, oh no, but you can't see that person. And now there's going to be this trigger, and you'll again have that invitation to um, turn it around for yourself and make something out of it. And I think some of those relationships or connections that we get to have in life that are pretty short but very impactful can really set us on a different or on the right trajectory. It's almost like
mm,
there's a soul agreement that says, okay, if I deviate a little too far, will you please come in and give me a kick in the butt?
mm,
So that I can then go and, find that within myself. And I oftentimes wonder if things had turned out differently in my own connections or relationships where I was very codependent. I was also somebody that got really quickly attached because I just loved the harmony of these things.
mm,
So I could never really be alone for a long time. I think at some point in my um, late 30s, I realized, wow, like I've been having one relationship after the other um, because it's so outside of me, what I think I
mm,
need.
mm,
So, and that was the point where I realized, okay, now I need, like you said, right? Like
mm,
I need to fall in love with my life. I need to fall in love with me. Um, and that is then also changing up the whole dynamics of how we were handed the baggage of more baggage or the beautiful gifts from our ancestors, right? In the lineage, to just go, okay, we're going to do this differently now. And you choosing to do that as a young mother, changing the whole inheritance for your son, right? Like, so he gets to see a mother, he gets to grow up with seeing a mother who is in connection with herself, and that will change everything. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I actually haven't been in many relationships in my adult life. It's funny, but I still fall in love. Well, I don't know now, but I used to. So I wouldn't feel a connection with many people, but when I did, it was like, okay, like, and also I think there's a cultural aspect wherein, I grew up in Spain and I feel very culturally Spanish in many ways, where it's a lot more like passionate and romantic. And the whole thing of like treading carefully or dating, the idea of dating, I didn't even date. Like I never would have thought to do dating. Like, let me just go for a coffee or whatever. Like that is, it was kind of alien to me. It's like, oh, you meet someone, you kind of, have a strong connection. It was all about like finding that strong connection and or not even finding it, like having it. But then I've been single for the majority of my life, but I've had a few, kind of important relationships, short-lived, the majority of them. I've not been with anyone for longer than 2 years. But yeah, so for me, even though I wasn't with many people, it was like I need to just learn to be with myself. And even though I'd been with myself all my life,
Yeah.
but to be with myself and to retain that sense of self when I then go into a relationship. Because I had been on my own and I wasn't, but it was like the moment I got into like it's as you say, like, we all have the urge to merge and the urge to individuate. And I would be like, because I'd been so individuated, not in life in general, but in a romantic sense, like I just wanted this all the time, like this, and it's like, no, you can't just have that, like, and yeah, so it's really interesting to kind of observe that really for myself and be like, okay, that's where I need to just do some work.
And especially raising children so beyond the whole gender, right? Like this, because an older part of me would have now said, oh, especially raising a young man, right? Like you get to raise him in a way that he can later go and enter a relationship in the honor of the feminine. But spiritually speaking, right? Like it's when it's not externalized anymore, for him to have a balanced understanding of his own feminine aspect and of his own masculine aspect, right? To have that represented through a mother that is very much in her empowered femininity, but also in balance with that other part, right? Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I always say, I'm a mother. I'm not a mom and a dad. And that was one thing my dad used to say, which I think, so my dad's queer and he just thought he could do everything and he was everything to us. But actually, no, like you were a dad and in many ways quite, he exhibited quite a lot of what his father, like toxic masculine traits, like he was really repulsed by my period, and so I was made to wash my sheets by hand if I stained them, and they couldn't just go in the washing machine because it was just like so just sort of like ingrained misogynistic attitudes or yeah, like beliefs that like really are in contrast to what you would expect like a kind of progressive queer person to have.
But
But
how can you be progressive at that time? Maybe in Spain, coming out of a very traditional family himself, right? Like, how can you,
oh,
when
he
there
was
was
the rebel.
no one to look up to, right?
But he was part of a movement of people who were breaking the mold. So that's what I mean. He was proper
Hmm.
like avant-garde and going to like the contemporary art fair every year, like Arco, like imagery. Like it was, do you know what I mean? Like they were like,
Hmm.
we're like the new generation, we're the movida madrileña. We are shaking this thing up. So that's what I mean. But you still then carry a lot of what's been inculcated in you. So I now say, like, what I try to do is to just be very aware of my limitations and my what I can bring to the table. So I'm not someone who's really on top of my child's academia, for example. You can see the letters.
Hmm.
This is when he was learning to read. So this is all like the phonetics. And I did put them up because they gave them to us. This is like 4 years ago and I haven't taken it down. It's like a nice
Oh,
reminder.
it's like an art piece.
Yeah. But the thing is, I really just focus on what I can give to him, which is
Hmm.
more like that kind of more feminine, emotional kind of nurturing and just talking to I love it when he's like, oh, tell me more about this. So when I'm
How
like
old is
talking to
he?
him, he's 9.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he gets really interested when
Yeah.
I explain why people do certain things or why they
Hmm.
behave a certain way. And I can tell now what I love about him is that he'll be like, Mum, like he'll tell me, like that when I'm dysregulated, he'll be like, I'm not doing that until you speak nicely to me. And it really angers me because I'm just like, what? Who are you to tell me how to? And he's like,
Go
he
to your room.
literally, he can point out when I'm out of line
Yeah.
as well. So, and I really like that. Not to say that there's no hierarchy. I remind him that I'm
Mm.
his mom, that I know best, and that, whatever I say, I've been in this world for longer, like I know more than him, but he still teaches me
Yeah.
a lot. And he just has these wonderful reflections. Yesterday I was washing his hair and he was like, we were talking about how humans, because they have all these machines and things that make them give them more power, they think they can just do whatever with the world, with animals, with
Mm.
nature, because he really appreciates nature. And he was like, you give a monkey a gun and he turns into a human. And I was like, wow, like he was basically like saying, like we're no better than animals. We just have these
Mm.
things. And we're actually not using it for good. And I just thought, wow, that's really quite deep.
Yeah. And he's right. I mean, especially looking into the news or whatever at the moment, you would think that we are pretty, like going back to those stages of awareness or consciousness. And but that's also the beautiful thing that I think now becomes more and more available on the mainstream
Mm.
media and even social media. And you can say whatever you want about it. Like you said, we've talked about it in previous episodes. Um, how distracting it can be and how much overload there is. But there's also so much good stuff out there. So you can really train your algorithm, which is basically
Mm.
your energy speaking back with you, or, responding back with what you set out there. So I think it is very straightforward nowadays how where you put your focus, that,
Yeah.
there you will have the access um, to that kind of energy. And I think to even train the kids in that regard and say, like, look, the one currency that is the most precious is your attention and your focus. So, where do you want to put that? And then life will respond with that. And I mean, that's something that the little ones get so quickly nowadays, where I see older people, they really struggle with that, because then also the victim comes out, right? Because all of the sudden, if I'm 50 or 60 and all of the sudden I realize from one day to the other, oh wait, I have choice. where I can
Mm,
focus and what I'd like to experience, but that would mean that I could have done that way earlier, right? So there's
mm,
the kind of this defense mechanism on,
mm,
no, we've always done it like that, just to
mm,
not upset the apple cart, right? I'd love to speak with you about the cultural aspect a little bit more, or not
mm,
cultural, but culture and
mm,
artistry, because I think we oftentimes see highly creative people, or we have seen a lot of highly creative people not being able to channel their creativity. So it just strikes me when you talk about culture, or, the cultural aspect, and, marrying the art forms of that as well. Um, and then you're on your awareness journey. I think that's only when the balanced form can really come in and it doesn't throw you off. I'm thinking of artists that were so tapped in on a consciousness level, but they weren't able to hold it in their life, or to ground it, right? And how, like, I don't know, can we switch gears here? Because, like, sometimes, like, one of those impulses comes in and I'm like, I don't even know if it makes sense. So I hope it does.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've understood the question, but is it that, when artists are engaging in their own art making, they can sort of channel or become connected to this higher being, and then in their everyday lives, they can just be,
Yeah. Because
is
we've just
that?
spoken about, like, how people that have no access in their mundane life, because they were
Mm,
raised, like, from the survival generations,
mm,
so there's, like, no access to any of that.
mm,
And then you've got that other extreme, maybe, that are the artists that can tap into it, but that aren't able to fully ground it, or, like, translate it into their everyday life. And I'm
mm.
just seeing that there's such a huge, beautiful part of you that is that bridge.
Yeah, and it's funny because I wouldn't call myself an artist, right? Like I would
Yeah.
call myself a cultural manager, but I do think that artistry or creativity is for everyone and by everyone. Like I know we have the art forms, but I think you can be creative in the way that you express yourself. You can be creative in the way that you cook. You can be creative in the way that you move. You can be creative.
Yeah.
Like if we think of creativity as beyond art, then we're all creative. I mean, we're always creating and
Exactly.
coming
Yeah.
up with. So, what I think, if I've got the sort of question or exploration right, is like, how do certain people, when they're engaging in their art form or as an artist persona, be so connected to, like
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
amazing way of questioning and looking at the world, and then in their everyday life, um, not necessarily like carrying that through. I think again, it's down to this self-awareness
Hmm.
piece. Just because you have this talent and you're able to channel it, and if you're not consciously aware of what you're doing, or maybe you're consciously aware of it, but you're separate, almost separating it from,
Compartmentalized. Yeah.
then of course it's not going to carry through. And one of the things that I'm now really trying to implement, like I'm like, okay, so how does the embodiment carry through to actually it does in everything that I do. It does in my
Hmm.
parenting, it does in my relationships, it does at work, because I consciously, and it's not effortless, but I
Hmm.
consciously try and bring that self-awareness to everything that I'm doing. So again, I think it's, yeah, like art is a way that can, but it doesn't necessarily mean, and it is embodied in the sense that it's all done by hand and physical, but it's like, I think doing something in an embodied way, it's like you bring that intentionality. So you might say, I want to cultivate kindness when I'm doing X. I
Hmm.
want to cultivate patience when I'm doing something else. And it could be something as simple as washing the dishes.
Yeah.
Like, how are you washing those dishes? Like, are you stressed the hell out and like going
Mm,
like, or are you like just, and I love kind of washing the dishes. It's something I've done since I was like 5. So for me, it's like a moment to like be mindful.
mm.
And so, yeah, so I think it's that bringing that awareness, that consciousness, that intentionality to everything that we do. And yeah, it's like the how and the how we do it as well. But yeah, I'm not sure if that sort of
Yeah.
answered what
And I
you.
don't know, there was just something about this,
Mm.
the feeling that you bring something into awareness with your work maybe, but also with your whole being that I'm feeling is very
Mm.
connected to um, not only culture when it comes to, like justice with ethnicity or whatever, but also looking a little bit broader, like really having a broader horizon to explore life through, or to, a lens to look into life through. Um, and like I said, because I wasn't raised like that, I see it in other people a lot, that, there's this beautiful ability to see what's available in society to us, right? But overall, I love that you picked that approach of embodiment as your self-discovery journey, because
Mm.
in the end, like you say, it needs to be available in the body. It needs to be something that you can, be with and work with and just make it tangible. I remember in my early days of my spiritual awakening, it was very much spiritual. It was just
Mm.
meditate, channel. It was all about consciousness and energy, but not so much about the body.
Mm.
And that was a whole piece of work for me. Excuse me.
Mm. No, I think for me, doing it through the body allowed me to know how to do it.
Mm,
It gave me the how to all
yeah.
of the existential questions I had, because actually I'd read books, not many, or heard people talk about, like, but it's like how, like, yeah, there's all these concepts, but how do you actually do that? Like, I remember reading The Untethered Soul, and I was like, oh, yeah,
Mm,
I love everything in here, but I'm like, there's no how to. Like, it's all like, I'm like, how do you spiral upwards, and how do you
mm,
not get, and for me, bringing it to the body gave me the tools, it gave me the how. And also because I already was I'm very psychosomatic, so I had very visceral somatic reactions to feelings, like my heartbeat, my stomach crunching up and like needing to go to the loo. Like, there's just so many things that were happening to me, like shaking when I'm given news that I don't really want to hear. Like, I just had it all. Like, it was all happening and I just didn't know how to be with it. So that's why I had to do it through the body. There was no other way for me.
mm,
And I'm not saying this is, like the answer to everything. Of course, you need the concepts and meditation. Even in my meditation, I do it in an embodied way. I just start to feel
mm.
different parts of my body, and that's how I sit with myself. And if thoughts come, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's interesting. And then so it just grounded me.
Yeah. I really think that it doesn't matter at all what's your entry point into self-discovery, right?
Mm.
Because, I could argue, what would it have been like for me if I'd been able to grasp it earlier, that it's about embodiment, because I
Mm.
was very heady and it was very much up
Mm.
in the ethers in my
Mm.
in my first years
Mm.
of exploring soul or the I amness of things. And in the end, I must say that it all comes at the perfect time, because once you change that trajectory into becoming aware of you're in the driver's seat and that it's all about how you are in connection with yourself, then the parts and pieces that you need to know either come through you or they are reflected through others back to you, and how you can find out more about what's that next step here, and how do I
Mm.
actually integrate that, because it's all about integration, right?
Yeah.
None of this is for the head. And in human design, for example, one of my favorite tools, it really is about the head is basically a great interaction tool, right? Because it makes it possible for you and I to have a conversation. And it's basically like a microphone, something that makes it possible to go into connection with
Mm.
others. But it is very much about the other. It's very much about information exchange. It's very much about just finding that rapport. But when it comes to self-connection, the head or the mind really isn't of much use at all, right? It is really about dropping into the heart. So dropping one level lower and just going like, okay, all of the answers will come through the heart. And no matter how you're wired, no matter what personality you are or what type you are or whatever, some people are more logical and more structured, and I couldn't help but to peek into your human design. So I'm just such a nerd when it comes to these things.
I love
And
that.
other people are more receptive and more intuitive and just more passive in that regard. So I find it interesting to see that immediately mirrored back from you, like your human design. You are a generator with a 1-3 profile, and you are out of the, yeah, in all of your things, you are more logically and structurally focused in your approach, research,
Mm.
trying things out. So that's just how you work, right? And for me, um, I'm very much the opposite. Like it's all about intuition. If I try to put like a lot of mental structure into things, then I'm just getting lost in the head. I'm completely disconnected from my physical knowingness. So again, what I loved about the conversation with Vanessa was how clear it came through that it's the body's intelligence that can take you out of the head and really feeling, okay, how is this for me? How does it feel in the body? And just, yeah.
Mm.
How did you find the embodiment practices immediately show up in your life?
So so basically in the course it like you start slow. So you start with, sort of like I can't remember what was the first practice that we were set, but basically it was like one, and then we would build up to doing
Mm,
more throughout the day. Um, but also, like I said, anything can be an embodied practice. So
mm,
it's really about the intentionality. So it just gave me that awareness of like, okay, and as someone who was a dancer and I still love dancing, I have like solo dance parties at home. Like um I was already very embodied, and some people even chose flamenco as a practice, you know.
wow, okay.
So and I'm like, I've been doing that, and
Yeah.
that was to like develop passion. And so for me, when I looked at it, it's so funny what you mentioned about the human design. I'd love
Mhm.
to take that offline because it's so interesting. I don't identify with what you shared, so I'd love to know more. Like, because I don't feel that I'm a logical person. I feel like I kind of bring that out maybe in certain spaces at work and stuff where I have to, work with spreadsheets and da da da. But then my preference is to be more flowy, more in the moment, more intuitive.
And again, they're not exclusive.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they're not disconnected. It can go together. But
Mm.
I mean, just looking behind you, that you are structuring a wall with,
Yeah,
and the way that we had our little interactions, we never spoke, and which I loved about this whole referral from Vanessa. But you were texting and you were giving me all of the information, and that for
yeah,
me, that's that part, like
right,
how
right.
you handle
The
the information
organizer.
part, organize the information part. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, sorry, what were we saying? So yeah, so the I really enjoyed doing them, and I had the time to do them, and
Mhm.
I just felt very privileged to be able to give the time to those practices. So I tried Aikido. So yeah, okay, that's what I was saying. I wanted to develop more discipline, and so really develop the kind of fire aspect of myself, like to be more boundaried, more disciplined with myself, and also the air aspect, being a bit more creative and fun, because I felt like I hadn't been doing that enough. So I was toying with the idea of like picking up a martial art or doing like improv theater. And in the end, logistically, again, it made more sense for me to do the improv theater, and I just loved it. I ended up like performing in front of a small audience, like as part of the newbies kind of section of this live performance, improv theater performance, and it was just so fun. Um, so yeah, it was just a great exploration,
Mm.
and yeah, nourishing myself. So I felt like I really resourced myself and pushed and challenged myself in a way that I could handle.
Mhm.
But yeah.
And you were speaking about fire earlier on, and I think you being of Spanish descent,
Mm.
it's already in there, right? And I also saw on your birth chart you are a Aries rising, right? And you are a early Aquarius, right? Like you are in the very early degrees of Aquarius, so that's the air part, right? I just always find it so interesting to sort of throw that in there because for me, there are so many ways of paying attention to what we're being gifted within our start codons, if you want to put it like
Mm.
that, right? It's almost like the toolbox that we came here with. And then going like, okay, maybe I have a little bit too little earth or too little water or
Mm.
something, right? But
Mm.
then life usually, and that's not something you need to pay attention to because life usually makes sure that, whatever is not in balance shows up in your life. I'd
Mm.
like to pivot a little bit here and quickly also touch upon your work because even
Mm.
though I thought right from the get-go, wow, your work is so interesting, we've not talked about it at all. So
Mm.
this could easily be a two-part episode. But
Mm.
um, tell me a little bit about what your work is about and how, yeah, what that entails.
Yeah, so it's mainly sort of program management around topics that so what I'm doing now, as I mentioned, I'm part of like this organization called the Commonwealth Foundation, which is essentially the people's arm of the Commonwealth. So the foundation was set up to acknowledge that the Commonwealth was going to be an association of peoples as much as of governments. So that's
Mm,
quite different. Like there's no other IGO intergovernmental organization in the world, to my knowledge, that has like a people's
mhm,
agency. I did have my reservations about the Commonwealth because obviously because of the historical,
mhm,
but actually the way it originated, um, uh, or the way it then became independent of what used to be the foreign service of the British Empire was through the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first leader of Ghana and led the independence movement. I think Julius Nyerere and Kaunda, so Zambia, and oh gosh, I'll forget the other country now, Julius Nyerere. Anyway, point being that independence, freedom fighters, leaders who then became presidents, called for this Commonwealth Association of Governments and for them to sort of redress the balance. So the way I see it is like, okay, we have this kind of history of empire and colonial rule. And now, like with the work that we're doing at the foundation, we get money mainly from like the main contributors, like the UK, Canada, and Australia, like some of the biggest paying contributors to the foundation, because it's all through member state contributions, and then we redistribute that through funding, grant funding, and by doing projects that go back to global south Commonwealth countries. So for me, I see it as a way of kind of redressing the balance, and that's been my whole motive
It's
throughout
like
my
this Robin Hood
career.
movement, right?
Pardon?
It's like a Robin Hood movement.
Yeah, and also just kind of, so for me before this it was like, okay, I really wanted to, so I did African studies as my master's, and I really wanted to kind of mainstream African culture and thought, and bring that to wider audiences, both African diaspora audiences, so people of African descent living in the UK, but also like non-African audiences, for people to really just, because otherwise, like what we end up consuming just tends to be the same. And it's like,
Mm,
actually, we come from a
mm,
very, like the world is so rich and diverse, and
yeah.
there's so much wisdom that we can gain from global south
Mm,
majority communities and cultures, and we just don't tap into it. Maybe
yeah.
more so now. Like I feel since I started that work, that was back in 2005, like, African culture has really shot up. Like, we've got
Mm,
Afro beats, which is, originated in Nigeria. It's essentially African pop everywhere.
mm,
We have got Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who I actually invited, a Nigerian writer who's again like a global literary icon. But all of these
mm,
things weren't really there when I started. And obviously, I'm not the first one to have contributed to that by all means. Like, there were like so many people doing this work.
mm,
But yeah, so that's my whole motivation is always to, yeah, like try and redress the balance somehow, and
mm.
bring forth ideas that are not so well represented or appreciated. Yeah, and I now feel like I've done this work for some time, and I put it in my sort of bio for you. I was like, the other day this idea came to me of like becoming a love and resilience coach, because I was just like, oh, I would really love to work one-on-one with people, but also like work with collectives. And when you're doing this sort of activism work, it requires so much resilience. It requires so much uh, yeah, resourcing, emotional resourcing. Like if you're a climate change
Yeah.
negotiator, you need to have that, and also like deal with the survivalship. Like, we've seen with Hurricane Beryl in the Caribbean, like people from small island states are literally like their lives are at risk. Like climate
Mm,
change is a very different threat to them than it is to
mhm.
others, in other parts of the world where we're not. So yeah, just kind of supporting those doing
Yeah.
the work.
How, and that's basically also leading me to a question that that I would have for you. If if any resource was no issue at all, how would you combine your love for self-discovery and embodiment with the work that you do? Like, what would be an ideal conglomerate tool that you could offer?
Yeah, so I think it's basically, as I said, like working on the personal, like on a one-on-one, but also with that kind of collective community building
Hmm.
outlook. Um, but I also feel like the facts are that, like, for example, when you're doing looking at coaching, I think 80% of coaching clients are women. And I feel like what I have to offer as a woman will probably resonate more with other women who may
Mm.
have or may be struggling with the same things that I've struggled that I could support with. So I have coached, I think, a couple of men, but like the majority of people I've worked with have been women. So, and the whole love thing is because it's something that I feel, yeah, just very passionate about, and I think that it
Mm.
kind of it's a really important aspect of people's lives, and then I think the community aspect is something I'll never leave.
Mm.
And just, yeah, so I haven't, yeah, haven't thought about an ideal merger of the two. But yeah, if it was no issue, I'd definitely be exploring that on my own, doing my own thing, and maybe being more of a free agent.
Yeah. And I
Um,
also think that probably it just happens naturally anyway, right? It is about you embodying that, and then it's not about you doing that, right? Like, because oftentimes, especially for me in the beginning, it was all about, well, what can I do with this, right? Like, how can I bring
mm.
this to the people? Because, this is the best thing since sliced bread, this is like, I need to bring it to the people. But really now, after 20 years of doing this work, and having integrated um, some of it, like I'm aware this is a journey that will probably continue until I'm locking this door behind me. But I really think now it's just about being in life with
Mm,
with the integration and with the authenticity, um, becoming this walking representative
mm,
of really grounded consciousness and grounded awareness. And whatever I do, I bring that with me. And just recently, it was quite difficult over the last years financially. But again, as life does it, there was really a huge gem for me to unpack here.
mm,
And I wouldn't have missed it for anything. Like this was amazing for me to realize and make this huge shift and transformation
mm,
towards just stop thinking that you need to save the world, that you need to just, I need to bring this to the world. I need to do something with it.
mm,
No, that's not about doing, it's about being.
mm,
And just recently, last week, I started two jobs, one in hospitality, one in retail, and I'm doing just service work, like just helping people going into connection and just making a difference through my beingness. It's not
mm,
about like, oh, look, these are all of the things that I found out, and let me tell you
mm,
how you can reach enlightenment. This is not about that. And
mm,
that was just one of those recent shifts that I realized this is what it's about now, at least in this phase of my life, to just
mm,
have that represented through me, that part. And I
mm,
can see that with the embodiment coaching and with all of your expertise and skills, but also your experience, um, how that lands in this beautiful vessel that you are, and then it just radiates out from that. So
mm. Thank you. That's very affirming, and to hear of your experience as well. And I agree, like focusing on being and um, there's this amazing street art artist called El Nino from Granada, like the kid, his nickname is, and his logo is like Ilumina tu parte, like show, like light, oh gosh, why can't I translate this into English? It's so simple. It's like light up your path or your part. Like, you just do your bit in your sphere, and
mhm,
just by being who you are and modeling whatever it is that you embody to others,
mhm,
that, that is more of a like the biggest kind of teaching and inspiration that you can give someone that you come in
Yeah,
contact with. Because
absolutely.
they're going to pick up on it, like even if it's like there's no point in me saying to my child, oh, you have to be patient when I'm being impatient with
Yeah.
him. And obviously, I'm going to be completely flawed and do that, like, be like, you have to be patient when I'm being
Yeah.
impatient with him. Like, it's just the hypocrisy all the time. So, also, like, not aiming to, uh, yeah, like, just kind of embracing and accepting everything as it comes and the messy reality that
Hmm.
is being human, like
That's life.
so yeah.
Yeah. Um, Vanessa left a question for you, and I think this is a good time to ask it before we jump into the sexy six, which are the
Okay.
questions that I always ask my guests. But what she asked was, it's funny because like the previous guest that recommended the next guest really had like a question for me to ask. And I asked
Mm.
Vanessa, what's the question I should ask Shayla? And she said, I wanted to commit to one more workshop this year. And what would this be? So I tried
One
to sort of put it
workshop.
into, if you know, let's put it a little gentler because I think she's personally invested in this. So if you were to commit to one more workshop this year, what would that be?
Okay. um oh gosh, I think it would probably still be on the on kind of like the path of embodiment and self-discovery, but perhaps something around yeah, like more the kind of love relationship coaching.
Mm,
But yeah, and I have been doing them maybe.
mm,
I haven't been sharing them with Vanessa. There's this feminine energy workshops that I go to every month. Well,
mm-hmm,
not every month, but they happen every month. And I love it because it's such a safe and nourishing and yummy space to be with other women and to just talk about what we're going through. So I do
mm-hmm,
try and prioritize them because they're also very affordable. So I love doing those. And yeah, I think, yeah, maybe continuing doing that, that work and learning from others.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vanessa's looking for me to be, yeah, more to not forget my path. And I kind of thank her for that because I do feel that at the moment, I felt like I've not really been doing as much of the embodied practices as I would like to because I've been so busy with my
Yeah.
day job. I feel like I'm sort of, you know, not it's a challenge when you know the life you want to live and you're not living it. So
Mm-hmm.
it feels like almost like a betrayal to myself. So yeah, but I still have been doing stuff. So yeah, just compassionate
And
self-acceptance.
that's it, right? Like really, it's a journey. It's a journey of
Mm,
becoming. It's a journey of being. It's a journey of
yeah.
just continuously moving forward and um, really learning that there is no rush in any of this, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, beautiful. Now, first question of the sexy six. What skill would you like to have?
Flying.
Flying.
It would be amazing to fly, wouldn't
Mm,
it?
I agree. Yeah.
I
That's,
used to
but there's
dream.
also part of the perks of meditation and really visualization, like being able to really tune into it, right? And then you think like, come on, meat suit. Wonderful. Then the second question, if you could spend an hour with anyone, dead or alive or fictional, who would it be and what would you be doing?
Hmm. Okay, so I do have some favorites in terms of historical characters, and I'd say Frida Kahlo comes to mind,
Mm,
just because she was so pioneering and just so amazing. And um, I'd get her to meet my son as well, because he loves her
Oh.
work. So it could be like a joint mother and son thing. And they could maybe do a painting together and,
Oh.
just spend time together, and then we'd do a selfie. Yeah, I love her spirit.
Yeah, we'll look out for your manifestation power,
Yeah,
and you'll
yeah.
post that on your social media,
Maybe if
right?
anyone knows Salma Hayek, she could dress up and, reenact her once again for us. I love her
Yeah.
as well, Salma. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If you were president of the world, what would be your first law?
Mm. Uh, Gosh, this is so basically, I would say that we would need to pass the law of ecocide. So, like, really get people to understand that we need to protect and preserve and look after nature.
Mm.
Um, yeah, maybe that's kind of like the political side of me. And then in terms of wishing, I would love for all beings to be born into love and to be bred
Mm.
with love. So, but
Yeah.
that's kind of like the utopian in me. How can we pour love and acceptance
Mm.
into every being that comes into this world?
Mm.
Giving children happy childhoods so that they don't have to recover from them when they're adults.
Or pass on the victim later on, right? I totally agree. That's a beautiful wish. Yeah.
That's my wish. My wish, and then my law, the legal side would be like,
I feel we can merge the two.
yeah.
Um, do you have a favorite book or movie or song of all time, and
Oh
why?
gosh, so hard. But I'm currently finishing, I'll just go with what the lowest hanging fruit. I'm currently finishing this book that I've been reading on and off for so long, in between reading other stuff, called The Happiness Trap.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love it because it's a how-to. So that together with another book called The Happiness Hypothesis are books that I've been gifting, obviously both nonfiction that I've been gifting to friends, because I think they really they really help us to understand how to live a happy and meaningful life. So yeah.
Are those from the same author?
No, different authors.
Okay.
Jonathan had it and is Happiness Hypothesis, and the Happiness Trap is by, oh God,
Put you on the
I
spot.
can't remember. I can't remember the name of the
But
author.
it should be easy to find
Yeah,
if people put in
yeah,
the
yeah,
happiness trap. Sounds
yeah.
awesome. Um, yeah. What else do I have? What's your most controversial opinion?
Mm, People should go on a course to become good parents before they decide to do it. Like, there should be
Hallelujah.
like a sort of compulsory sort of
Yes.
training. And men who are not, kind of ready to be fathers should just have a vasectomy and have it reversed when they are ready.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Where can I vote? Yes. And the final question, what are you most excited about in the future? Either personal or collective or both?
Yeah, I'm excited to continue on this path. I'm
Mm.
excited for the opportunities that may come, and to saying yes to more, and yeah, excited to see my child grow, and how my current relationship will go. I'm back with the person so yeah, so excited for a lot of things, and yeah, excited to see how the kind of positive movements continue to change things and
Mm.
move the dial on certain very urgent issues that we need
Yeah.
to tackle. So yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely doing your part in that, which I think is so
Mm,
beautiful.
Trying.
I really thank you for this beautiful conversation. It was just so lovely to speak with you and to learn about your universe and um, yeah, just gaining another friend. Like,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for trusting Vanessa's recommendation. And thank you to Vanessa for believing in me. It's like the imposter side of me thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on a podcast where all these people who are already doing amazing work for many years are featured. But I'm like, yeah, I have my contribution to make as a
Yeah.
kind of someone who's figuring it out.
Yeah, and what I love about the way that the way that this is set up, this podcast, is that I trust enough that everything will be represented. If this was like a massive potluck, you know, everybody gets to bring their ingredient or their dish, and um, no no one will be the same as the other. So there's
Mm.
always going to be this personal nuance and flavor. And what I take away from our conversation was completely new. And so I think that's also my wish for the audience, that they really enjoy this format and that they took away something that will inspire them to make a difference. I think you are definitely one of those standards. Definitely inspired me a lot. So thank
Mm,
you for sharing.
thank you.
Yeah,
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
yeah.
much.
And I wish you all the best for your future. And we'll be seeing what comes out of this.
Yes, I'll be following for sure. I
Yeah.
already follow, but I'll continue to listen to others. I think it's such a great concept. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited for it too. So much love to you and your little family. And I definitely will speak with you again. Oh,
Take care.
thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the Rocketwoman Show. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with your universe. We can always inspire each other's orbits. All episodes are available on YouTube and Spotify, and new ones are always released on a Friday. For updates, you can find me on Instagram at The Rocketwoman Show, and if you're interested in my work as a guidance coach, I work with human design, the gene keys, astrology, and plenty of other intuitive wisdom that I've collected over the past 20 years. So if that resonates, go and check out my website, thezencubator.com, or follow the Zen Cubator on Instagram or Facebook. I wish you a magical week and hope to welcome you back next time.